Hi, welcome to True Creeps, where the stories are true and the creeps are real. We'll cover stories from grotesque gore to the possibly plausible paranormal, to horrifying history, to tense and terrible true crime, and everything else that goes bump in the night. We're your hosts, Amanda, and I'm Lindsay, and we want you to join us while we creep. We cover mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about one of the most classic urban legends that we could think of, just the idea of organs being harvested. And we were thinking about it, we were like, what's the truth of this? Because this seems to be an urban legend that sticks around.
Yeah, and it's terrifying.
I also will say that we finally got to the episode that broke me. When doing the research for this, my husband was like, Windows lock, you're done for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like sobbing when I was reading it because, you know, the world's horrors. So yeah, heavier than I thought we were going to get, but here we are.
Yeah, it's a big, like, fuck, scary. It's one of the scariest things and worst things you could do, right? Like, in someone not know. Ugh, it gives me chills just thinking about it.
Yeah. So to start, let's get into the different urban legends that there are. So there's a couple that were more prevalent in South America, and these were primarily during the 1980s, and they both have to do with kids. The first is that homeless children were being abducted and that they would be left somewhere after their eyes or kidneys were removed. Typically, it would be like one eye, and that there would be money tucked into their pocket and a note saying like, thanks for the eye or thanks for the kidneys. Fucked.
Yeah.
Then there was the legend that a child would be adopted by rich parents and they're being promised this better life. And rather being raised happily by this affluent family, the adopted quote unquote parents would take them to a clandestine hospital and then their organs would be harvested for rich buyers. What the fuck? Fucking bad.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been other stories surrounding kids like that where they want a particular kid because they want to save or like do something for their current kid or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about adult stories, these became more popular in the 90s. And there were two different stories that we saw. Both are kind of similar. The first is college kids in the United States. So college kid or person in their early 20s would go out with friends or a woman where they would be drinking. And in the morning, they would wake up in a tub filled with ice. As they were coming to, they would realize that they had this excruciating pain in their abdomen, and they would reach down to their side and would feel an incision. And then around this time, they would also notice a note that says something like, thanks for the kidney, or you should go to the hospital.
Yes. That was, unfortunately, I remember my mom saying that a lot. Like, if you're going to go out and do stupid things, you're going to wake up in a bathtub of ice.
See, like, to me, and many people on the internet have said this, that if someone's going to steal your organ, they're just going to kill you. Like, they're not going to, you expect them that they're going to Walmart, they're like, I'll take 10 bags of ice and they're going to fill up a bathtub for you and then like tuck you into the ice and then write a little note. Like, no, they would just kill you.
Right. And it would be harder, like to put you in a hotel room or something like that. It's all digital now. I don't know.
Yeah. So the other one is with people who are traveling. So this story is much like the college kid story, except that the legends are nearly always a woman luring a man, and that typically they're traveling in a country that's not the United States. It's not always people from the US. It's just typically the stories aren't here. So just a few.
Right. So now that we've talked about urban legends, let's talk a bit about the history of taking another person's body part. Before organ theft, there was the general theft of human body parts. One example is the sale and or theft of human teeth for dentures. There was a period of time where wealthy or powerful people would use the teeth of other people in their dentures. And these dentures were called Waterloo teeth. We couldn't find exactly where the name came from. Bizarre. The practice included pulling teeth from battlefield casualties, but often the dentists would pull some of their own teeth to use for their patients' dentures.
I hate it.
I don't know anyone that likes someone enough in like a service position to give them their teeth, but okay.
I'm not giving anyone my fucking teeth. Like, there's no one I would give my teeth to.
No.
Not a single person.
Mm-mm. And like, also, who would trust a dentist that didn't have teeth?
Yeah.
Like, if they're just like pulling them out and giving them to people.
Yeah. Like, I just, that stresses me out.
It really does. So this practice also predates people who were just dentists. Often they were acting as dentists while working in a different trade.
So like
So
barbers.
like they had another job.
Yeah. Like a part-time dentist.
Yeah, your barber dentist.
Yeah. I was going to sing part-time dentist to the sound of Backdoor Lover from the Josie and the Pussycats movie. But I don't want us to get more bad reviews.
More bad reviews?
Yeah.
Fuck them.
But just know that I was gonna.
You can't let them take this from you.
I'm your part-time dentist. There you go. I won't do more than that because
Perfect.
I think it's when it's long that people get extra mad.
I don't care. This is our show.
I don't care. I also just don't have more. I don't have more in me. I just have that. That's enough.
We'll check back in at the end of the episode.
Yeah, maybe I will.
So often these barber dentists, as we'll call them, they would pull a tooth from one person who actually needed the tooth pulled for whatever reason, and then they would add it to dentures for others. So like, you want this like cavity riddled tooth in your denture? It just seems weird.
I also just feel like I'd want to keep my own teeth. Like I'd be like, that's mine. And we'll get to more on why you might want to keep your own tooth in a second.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this began before the Battle of Waterloo, which was in 1815. So it's a bit unclear, again, why we call them Waterloo teeth. Just strange. It's a fun word to say, though.
Mm-hmm.
So the practice began at least as early as the French Revolution in the 1700s. In addition to sourcing from live people, teeth were often sold from graves. They were typically hung on a string and then sold as a set. That sound weird?
Such a jewelry. All I can picture is the sound that would make.
Ew.
Can't you hear it? Doesn't it make your bones hurt?
Yeah. I don't know why I'm thinking this. I don't even remember if it was part of it. But in American Horror Story, I believe Roanoke, I think they had like things made from body parts. And in my head, it had teeth in it, but who could know? Like little wind chimes.
Are you thinking of the ear necklaces?
No, I'm thinking of a scene in American Horror Story. In my head, now it has teeth. I don't know if it was just bones, but now there's teeth there.
Oh, heard.
So you could buy a string set of dead people teeth.
Perfect.
And then put them in your mouth. I hate it. It makes me like uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So Andrew Spielman, who worked as the Associated Dean for Academic Affairs in the NY School of Dentistry, provided a price list from the Baltimore Telegraph from 1795 in an article that we got from the BBC. The price for one tooth was $7, and that would be about $175 today.
So to think that people were just like having their tooth pulled and then leaving it, I'm like, you were leaving a substantial amount of money.
Mm-hmm. One of the most horrific sources of teeth is the practice of taking teeth from enslaved people in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
That hurts my soul.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about George Washington now because there's a lot going on with his teeth and there's a lot of rumors of what it was that we were told in grade school.
Yes.
And it definitely was not.
Yes. Say what you thought it was.
So in school, I remember them clearly saying that he always had wooden teeth.
I remember that too.
And so I was like, am I crazy? I did like that whole thing of like,
Mhm.
am I remembering something wrong and everyone else is too? No, they fucking did teach you that because they don't teach history right.
Yeah, they were like, we can't say what he actually had in his fucking mouth.
Yeah, because then you might not like him and then you
Mhm.
won't want to do the activity where you color his face. Like,
Mhm.
what the fuck? Anyways, U.S. education system.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
True gem. So he had various sets of dentures. Some were lead, tin, copper, or silver alloy. Some had ivory from elephants and walruses. So sad. He had horse teeth at one point, cow teeth, and then where we're getting to, human teeth. There are records to show that Washington purchased 9 teeth from enslaved people in 1784. The notes from the transaction state that they were for Washington's dentist, but it's unclear whether it was for Washington's dentures or another patient's teeth. But like, come on, they were for him.
Yeah, fucking horrific.
It is. So he used some of his own teeth that had been pulled in his dentures as well. And in a letter he wrote, quote, "In a drawer in the locker of the desk which stands in my study, you will find 2 small teeth, which I beg of you wrap up carefully and send enclosed in your next letter to me. I am positive I left them there. Or in the secret drawer in the locker of the same desk." Could you imagine leaving teeth places? Like, that's so fucking weird.
Or you accidentally get the wrong person's mail and there's teeth inside.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm. And just in case you needed something else to scare you about what other people could be doing with your teeth, here we go.
In an extra bizarre note, Washington's dentist drilled a hole through Washington's last tooth and threaded it through a wire to keep it on his watch chain.
Process that. Now, it was already removed from Washington. That's a good point to note. It was removed from him previously.
But He was worried about it getting damaged, so he put it in a little oval gold locket with glass on either side.
I so thoroughly hope that I am never important enough for someone to want to keep my teeth. Never a goal of mine.
No. And I see sometimes at like oddity places, like teeth items.
Yes. Fucks me up.
And like, I love oddity places and I love looking at it, but like, I do not want that in any way, shape, or form near my home.
I just feel like if you're asking for a body part that's going to have like some haunted juice to it, teeth feel like a one that would be
haunted juice.
Yeah.
And teeth together.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks.
But like, so we bring up teeth and Washington's dentures as an earlier example of taking body parts and giving them to someone else.
Yes.
And so now that we've kind of talked about the history of that, let's talk about specifically the history of organ transplants. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd ever really thought about it. I know that medical technology and what we can do has changed drastically over the past 100 years. So when I really think about it, it's not too surprising that the first successful organ transplant was in 1954. And it was actually a kidney transplant between two twins. So Ronald Henrik donated his kidney to his twin brother, Richard, who was suffering from kidney failure. Richard lived another 8 years after the surgery. Amazing. And Ronald lived until 2010.
That's crazy.
So he lived a full life having given a kidney to his brother. Now, one of the reasons this was so successful was because they were twins.
Right.
When you had non-related donors or donors that were like less than twins in terms of relation, the organ transplants weren't nearly as successful. That is until anti-rejection drugs were invented. Then organ transplants were happening more frequently with success, and that happened in the 1980s. So given that the ability to transplant organs successfully is relatively new, it's not surprising that we wouldn't immediately have legislation to keep this from being very fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
There were no laws about organ donation and transplants until the 1980s. In the United States, the National Organ Transplant Act was in 1984. The Transplant of Human Organs Act was passed in India in 1994. And in the UK, they had the Human Tissue Act of 2004. Whew. So too recent.
That seems like a big distance between those years.
Yeah, it's like we could do more than one a decade. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't, you don't have to wait another decade. This isn't like a Jeepers Creepers situation where you can only do one at a time, you know?
Right.
But there wasn't an investigated or prosecuted case of organ theft or trafficking until the early 90s, so in 1993. And this happened in India and inspired India's 1994 transplant legislation. And that case wasn't even prosecuted until 2008. Whew.
That's wild.
Right? So they're like, okay, it just started. As humans, we're like immediately, how can we make this the worst thing possible?
Of course.
How can we take this amazing life-saving thing that we've learned how to do and make it heinous? So when we are thinking of the urban legend, we're thinking of like one person's kidney getting stolen. Presumably it's like by a trafficking ring, right? It's not just like a person who's like, I would like this one kidney, good day. Like that's all I'll ever do.
Put it on a necklace.
Yeah. But I never really thought about that, right? I never thought about like, who's the person stealing it, right? Like, why are they stealing it? Do they have a ring? Probably. So there are situations where people will willingly give an organ for compensation. We're calling that organ trafficking. For today, we will refer to every other situation as organ harvesting.
Mm-hmm.
So situations where you thought you were going to get paid and you didn't. Situations where you didn't know that's what was going on. Situations where you just wake up one day and your organ's gone. So organ trafficking is incredibly difficult to investigate and even more difficult to prosecute. And part of that is because you have people who are very wealthy doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So the records aren't there. The idea of who is supposed to notify authorities. Should it be the doctors who are assessing donors? Doesn't that kind of fuck with patient confidentiality? Is it people who are guarding who go into which country and why? And are you getting a medical procedure? Why? How do you do it when people are in different countries? That makes it very difficult. But more than anything else, the thing we learned about organ trafficking is that it's a pervasive and global issue and that it is so much more widespread than we had ever considered and like so fucking awful.
Yes.
We've covered a lot of bad fucking stuff. And this is the absolute worst that I think we've ever covered, at least in my opinion, in terms of we've never talked about this many people before.
Right. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. Yeah.
So America's first convicted case of organ trafficking was Levi Isaac Rosenbaum, an Israel citizen who was living in Brooklyn, New York, who pled guilty in October of 2011 for brokering 3 illegal kidney transplants. It just makes me so uncomfortable.
Fucking right it does.
As we're talking, we're like squirming.
Yeah.
So he was paid $120,000 for each transaction, which like relatively, that doesn't seem like a lot to like do this kind of horror, you know?
Oh, wait until we get to outside of America. Wild.
For sure. But it's just like, there's no amount of money, I guess, that would like justify this.
No.
But like in my head, that just doesn't seem like a lot. But per U.S. Attorney Paul J. Fishman, Rosenbaum admitted he was not new to the human kidney business when he was caught brokering what he thought was a black market deal. The investigation into Rosenbaum included a cooperating criminal defendant, Solomon Dweck, and an undercover FBI agent. The FBI agent told Rosenbaum she was one of Dweck's employees and was looking for a kidney for her uncle. He informed her that it would be $150,000 and that part of the money would be used to find a donor in Israel. After she had already paid thousands of dollars to Rosenbaum, he informed her that the price was now $160,000. So he's like upping it by 10 grand.
Mm-hmm.
Rosenbaum told Dweck and the undercover FBI agent to write 4 blank checks for $10,000 each, and that he would be filling in the names of charitable organizations on each check. Rosenbaum assured them that he was experienced with this and that he had been arranging transplants for a decade.
A decade.
Still so bizarre to like go to a person and not like a doctor, you know, like in an office with paperwork and all that. It just freaks me out.
Mm-hmm.
He also said that he had just facilitated another transplant 2 weeks prior. Rosenbaum would have donors travel from Israel to the U.S. to donate their kidney. And from what we saw, it looks like donors were paid about $10,000. So he's saying $150,000 to $160,000, and then the donors are only making $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
During the course of the investigation, Rosenbaum said that he had arranged hundreds of transplants.
I think an important thing to note here, too, is that while these consultations were happening in an office outside of a hospital, the transplants themselves had both the donor and the person getting the kidney in hospitals that were well known. Like major reputable hospitals were doing this.
Right. So it's taking place in a reputable place, but then like when you're organizing it, it's under the table, shady, creepy, weird ways.
Yes.
Okay, so going back to the people who donated, the investigation didn't look into them because they had left the U.S. long before the investigation started, and the only information law enforcement had was just their names. Imagine trying to find a first and last name worldwide without any other information.
Mm-hmm.
The donors were often people who were ethnic minorities or immigrants in Israel. However, some of the donors over the course of this operation were also from rural Moldova, Romania, and Brazil. As we noted at the top of the segment, Rosenbaum pled guilty. However, his sentence was just 2.5 years. I'm like grabbing my face, saying that out loud.
That's nothing.
Yeah, he was released in 2014, so he's out there somewhere.
Yeah. That's a shockingly short amount of time. Now, I will say the people who were in this particular ring were quote unquote consensual, but they were people who they were preying on, right?
Yes.
Because I want you just to like take a moment to imagine a world in which you are in such financial distress that you sell an organ, that you travel to a different country and you sell your organ. How is it that we have a world where there are people who literally sell an organ so that they have enough money to live, and people who spend like $50,000 on a purse?
Yes.
How is that a world we fucking live in? I want people to be able to be rewarded for their hard work, but isn't there a point when we're just like, hey, this person is selling organs to live?
Yeah.
And that is one of the most gutting things about this, is because over and over, you find situations where there's people who are selling their organs for a better life for their family, and then they're not even always told what the downside is, right? Because if you are an organ donor, depending on what you give, you might need medical care for the rest of your life.
Yeah, or medication.
And if nobody tells you that going in, you actually end up in a worse position.
Yes. And the medications, from what I understand, especially out-of-pocket medications, are insanely priced.
Yes.
It just fucks them over forever.
Yeah, and it's just gutting. So our next case is in London. And the news reports that we read about this call the victim of the situation Daniel. It's not his real name, but Daniel's what he's going by, so that's what we'll call him. So in May of 2022, Daniel, a 21-year-old man from Nigeria who worked selling cell phone accessories in a market, traveled to the United Kingdom for what he believed would be a life-changing opportunity with a better job. Before he left Nigeria, he was asked to go for a blood test, which he thought was because it was part of the visa process. He wasn't really familiar with it. And they were like, oh, you need to go do a blood test for this. And he was like, okay. When he traveled to London, he didn't have any extra money with him, and his passport was with the people who booked his travel, so he didn't have access to it. After he got to London, he met a woman named Sonia, who was 25 years old and was also from Nigeria. And while they were meeting, a photo was taken of the two of them.
Again, weird.
Daniel then spoke to doctors in the private patients unit of the Royal Free Hospital in London, but he spoke limited English. Now, before he was there, he was coached on what to say, and he was coached by an interpreter who was also interpreting between him and the doctors. So the doctors he was speaking to were walking him through the risks of the operation and how, after the operation, he would need a lifelong medical care. So keep in mind, he thinks he's coming to the UK for a better job.
Right.
So he's like confused as to why he's there. But this is the moment when he realized that the opportunity he had traveled for in the UK wasn't a job. It was to be a kidney donor to a stranger.
How horrifying.
I can't imagine just like the feeling in your stomach. Also, like if you're in a place where you don't speak the language and like you're already kind of powerless in the situation.
Yes.
My heart, it just breaks. So the doctors noticed Daniel's hesitancy and halted the process because they believed he was being coerced into donating his kidney.
How are doctors better detectives than detectives in a lot of the cases that we talk about?
Fair. And yet they did not report this, although they should.
Yeah, they should have.
They should have, and they didn't. So later, Daniel realized that Sonia was the woman who would be receiving his kidney, and that the photo was taken as backup for a fake story about Daniel being her cousin. While it is legal to donate a kidney, you cannot do so for compensation. So they needed to create evidence of a link between Sonia and Daniel. Now, Sonia, she did genuinely need a kidney, right? She had serious kidney disease, and it required getting 3 to 4 5-hour dialysis sessions.
That's sad.
So between 15 and 20 hours of dialysis a week, that's a lot. But after Daniel left the hospital, he returned to the apartment in London where he was staying. And this was arranged for him, right? So 2 men then arrived at the apartment and began to examine him. They then talked to one another about sending him back to Nigeria to have his kidney removed. He ran out of the apartment and slept on the streets for 2 nights before ultimately going to a police station near Heathrow.
I just think about like how terrifying that is.
Yes.
Like being in a different place from home. People are trying to fucking steal your kidneys from you. You have no idea what's happening.
You have no money. You have no passport.
Yes, they've orchestrated all of it to the point where you have zero power as far as like where you stay, how you get home, where you're going, all of that. How horrific.
And as we continue on, you realize just how little power he really did have in this situation too. I think that fucks me up too.
So Daniel now has heavy police protection. And from Daniel's statements, law enforcement was able to find Sonia's father. He was a very powerful Nigerian politician named Ekwemata, and his wife, Beatrice. He was a multimillionaire and a senior senator. Ekwemata, however, said that he too had been misled. He had even introduced laws that criminalized donating organs for reward in Nigeria.
So fucking mad.
Yeah. There was also a middleman in the scheme, Dr. Obina Obada. He was aware of the process at the Royal Free Hospital because just 1 year earlier, he had a transplant himself there. In court, the conspirators alleged that Daniel was fully aware of the agreement to sell his kidney and that he knew the person who had sold their kidney to Dr. Obada. So, organ trafficking is considered modern slavery, and modern slavery cases are very difficult to try because it's hard to investigate them quickly, partially because the culprits can leave the country, which we know how that is, trying to investigate them then, right? In June of 2022, Detective Sergeant Andy Owen received a call telling him that Ekwemandu and Beatrice were both flying into London. He got his team to Heathrow, where the armed officers escorted the couple from the aircraft and seized their mobile phones. On the phones, they found detailed evidence of the plot, including messages about the donor fee, which was $5,487. You may think that they spoke in code or something, but it literally says Dr. Amina just sent another huge bill, and then it lists out the amounts.
They weren't even trying to hide because they were so powerful.
Yeah, they didn't think they'd get caught.
Mm-hmm.
Nigerian senators sought to have the case moved to Nigeria and wanted access to Daniel, which concerned UK's law enforcement.
Fair.
Right. The case did not move to Nigeria, and Obada, as well as Sonia's parents, were both found guilty. So Obada, the doctor, was sentenced to 10 years. Beatrice received 4.5 years. And then her husband, Ekwemandu, first name Ike, was sentenced to 9 years and 8 months, which is a bizarre amount of time.
I agree.
Sonia was found not guilty. And Daniel's family back in Nigeria fear revenge from allies of the Ekwemandu family, which, totally fair. They're super rich and powerful.
Well, and also the senators were like, bring him back here. We'll make sure everything's fine.
Reporters from the BBC spoke with Daniel's brother, who said that no one from his family had heard from Daniel since February of 2022.
That's so sad.
They only found out where he had gone when they saw the news reports from the trial. That breaks my heart for them.
Yeah.
His brother said, quote, "We've been crying every day, and my father has grieved so much he's become very sick. Daniel was deceived and carried away."
I hate it.
There are many people who believe that Daniel was aware of what was going on, but his mentor and previous landlord said that this is something Daniel never would have done. Before Daniel disappeared, the two spoke every day. UK's Modern Slavery Act of 2015 includes provisions for human trafficking. And like we said, organ harvesting is a type of human trafficking, and it is punishable by life in prison. And from what we understand, Daniel's family has possibly heard from him, but they don't know where he is. No one does. And then again, it's kind of difficult because his name was changed. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly where he may be. And hopefully he's being protected, though. I hope so.
Yes. So we're talking about different cases from different countries. So we've talked about the United States. We've talked about the UK. And our next case is from India. So in February of 2008, Amir Kumar was arrested under accusations of being a leader of an organ theft ring. Now, when he was arrested, he was at a wildlife resort in Nepal. Initial reports suggested that he may have been involved in at least 500 kidney thefts between 1999 and 2008.
That's too many.
500.
Yeah. Ugh.
Many of the organ donors have been tricked into donating their organs and were paid as little as $300. $300 for a fucking organ. Many of Kumar's clients came from other countries like Greece, the United States, Turkey, or Canada. Kumar made so much money from his organ ring that he was able to finance Bollywood films.
Oh my gosh.
In our research, we learned a little bit about his scheme. So he paid cab drivers to direct medical tourists to his operation so they could receive organs. And he had 2 men who he had hired to scout potential donors. Typically, the donors were beggars, unemployed day laborers, or taxi drivers. So they were purposely looking for impoverished people who had very little options.
Right.
As time went on, he began to pay the scouts more than the actual donors. So the scouts were making thousands of dollars per person, but the donors were making anywhere from $300 to $1,000.
Isn't that disgusting?
Disgusting.
That a human could do that to another human first off, but also not even give a damn about the rest of their life after. They're just like, here you go.
Exactly. And it's bad enough to think that they are preying on impoverished communities, but what makes it worse is that in practice, there wasn't always consent to take the donor's kidney.
No.
So one case was Muhammad Salim Khan, and he was at a corner where day laborers gathered to look for work in Meerut in India. A man approached him and said he had a 3-month job doing construction work where he would make $3 a day. Muhammad excitedly accepted that offer and went with the man. The man then took him to a house where Muhammad was held at gunpoint. And while they were holding him at gunpoint, they forcibly injected him with sedatives to knock him out. He woke up several hours later with terrible abdominal pain. There was a man wearing a surgical mask who informed Muhammad that he had taken his kidney and that Muhammad would be shot if he tried to tell anyone what happened. 2 other victims, Shakil Ahmed and Asim Muhammad, also recounted similar experiences. Police learned of the organ harvesting ring when a person who was a former victim turned scout came to them and told them about the scheme.
Ugh.
Kumar and others received jail time and fines for the ring. Kumar was sentenced to 7 years in prison for organ harvesting, which, remember, they said upwards of 500 for a decade.
Yeah.
And then He was intimidating witnesses, so he got another 7 years.
That is not long enough, though. Either way.
Not long enough. Like,
fuck this guy.
Why is the penalty for intimidating a witness the same as stealing 500 organs? That should be higher.
Yeah. Like, that's 500 lives that he's just fucked.
Yes.
And he gets 7 years.
Yes. Insane. Well, and also, if you were a recruiter and you were fine making thousands of dollars where that other person made just a couple hundred, chances are you would figure out that you could pay them zero.
Yeah, that's true.
So I would imagine that more often than not, they were just straight up stealing them. They weren't even paying the person. Not that that makes it okay at all, but I'm saying, like,
no,
it's so much worse than a person who has made that decision, at least.
Yes.
Because it might be a decision under financial duress, but it's at least like you making a decision with your bodily autonomy.
Right.
Fucking fuck.
So we're moving on to another country now, which still, like, breaks my heart that this is happening all over the place, right?
Globally,
yeah. So law enforcement busted an organ harvesting ring in the eastern Punjab province of Kashmir of Pakistan. They are believed to have stolen over 300 organs.
Fuck.
It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Farad Mukhtar is believed to be in charge of the ring. Mukhtar has been arrested 5 times for malpractice.
Fuck.
Sources say that Mukhtar had a recruiter who would lure vulnerable patients away from hospitals, which, terrifying again.
Mm-hmm.
They would then steal healthy organs and sell them to wealthy patients. The recruiter was also Mukhtar's surgical assistant, but was previously working as an auto mechanic.
A hard profession, but definitely not medical.
Exactly, yeah. Per the chief minister of the Punjab province, Mashin Navki, each kidney was sold for about $120,000. Authorities have reported that at least 3 people died from the harvesting.
Fuck.
Typically, the transplant took place in private homes without unwitting patients knowing what was going on. Also by a fucking mechanic, like, helping.
Fucking right?
What the fuck? This case was reported in October of 2023, but there was a previous Punjab organ trafficking case that came to light in January of 2023 when a 14-year-old boy had been missing. He was found in an underground lab and his kidney had been removed. Fucking 14-year-old boy.
14, a child, a baby.
So, like, they must have gotten desperate because they couldn't find anyone. And so they're like, oh, now we'll move on to fucking children? Like, fuck these people.
Yeah, fuck these people. So, we told you we were going to talk about an international and pervasive problem. And boy, did we. Amanda, before we started researching for today, did you know it was this fucking bad?
I thought that it still happened around, but I didn't realize that it was so recent and so frequent.
Yes. I was like, okay, it probably happens. I didn't realize to this extent. I didn't realize the extent in which donors were selling organs either. Like, I think that in my head, I was like, it's only thefts, right? It wasn't that we live in a world where people don't have enough money to survive, so they sell their organs. And I'm aware that that comes from, like, a place of privilege and, like, not having to know that, but it's fuck, man. Just fuck.
See, I knew a little bit about that part, only because I don't know if you've ever gotten the ads for it, but it's like, do you need to pay for a big purchase or school or a car or whatever? You can sell your eggs. Or
I didn't even consider. Yeah, I've seen those things, but I didn't consider, like, to me, I'm like, that's biological material more than, like, an organ. But I see what you're saying.
No, for sure. But it's still, like, it's in the same kind of realm. Not saying, like, obviously you're not going to die. You're not going to, like,
yeah, it's like selling plasma.
It's not going to be, like, insane things. Yeah. Plasma is another one. I see it on a lot of our groups. Like, people are like, oh, you know, Uber Eats isn't working. I still need to make some more money. And, like, the first thing is like, oh, go sell your plasma.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sad that, like, a lot of people resort to doing this stuff, which I mean, selling plasma, it saves people sometimes, or for weird facials that we've talked about.
Yeah, but it is a good thing to do, the donating of it.
Yes.
We're not talking about, like, the ethics of donation. We're talking that, like, the level of poverty
yes,
that exists in our world with the level of wealth.
Right. And, like, same thing, like, donating an egg is not a bad thing at all. Like, that helps the family and all of that. But also preying on college kids that are trying to pay off college, like, kind of sucks.
Yeah, it does. So all of the research, super heavy, but the most heinous forms of organ harvesting that we wanted to talk about today require a deeper dive. We wanted to make sure that we could talk from a place of, like, thorough understanding for our next organ harvesting episode, which we're thinking is going to come out later this year, but it it is a heavy lift because it's 5-digit, perhaps 6-digit numbers of people we're talking about, and being able to like sit down and go through that I think is important for us to like share, because I didn't even know about this. I didn't know about all the organ harvesting we talked about today. And so it's a heavy weight, but I think it's worth lifting. But we couldn't do all of it today because that's just too much for 2 people.
It is. Yes.
So we will have an entire episode on more organ harvesting stuff. Now, we don't always give you homework when we finish. Often we ask you questions like, did you know this? Tell us, draw us your cryptid. But today we have a little homework for you. So long as this does not impede on your religious beliefs, please consider that one day you will likely die, unless you are immortal, and that sounds exhausting. There are so many people who need organ donations to live. Perhaps consider becoming a deceased donor so that when your inevitable end does come, you can help save the lives of others. We will include a link to be what's called a deceased donor in our show notes. And just as a note too, should that be something that you do, talk to the people in your life so that they know.
Yes.
So that if something happens, they can make decisions knowing what you want, whether it's this or not.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a beautiful thing to be able to make your inevitable end help someone live.
Yeah. And they use a lot of things that you wouldn't even think of. So like personally, a donor has helped my family recently. Last year, my husband completely killed his knee, and he has donor tissue now in his knee. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to reconstruct it.
Wow.
Which is insane. But yeah, when we went in, they gave us this little card that said like, we can't give you the name of your donor, but you can write something to their family.
That gets me deep in my heart.
Yeah.
Man, like, and I understand, like, it's a hard thing to think about. Nobody wants to think about dying. And yet it is most likely something all of us will encounter. And what more beautiful of a legacy than helping other people live. So as I begin to cry, this is our first organ harvesting episode. If you have other stuff you want us to cover that's a strange urban legend or a deep dive into something that you don't know about, feel free to send it our way, even if it's a big lift. I think it's worth sharing information, you know?
Sometimes it takes us a little while to keep researching, but we get it done. We've talked about the hours it takes.
Yeah, we have. But again, we'll have a link for more information about becoming a deceased donor in our show notes. And with that, have a great weekend.
Thanks for creeping with us.
Thanks for listening. And as always, a special thank you to our patrons who support us via Patreon.
Please see the link in our show notes to learn more about how you, yes you, can begin to haunt the dump, guard vortexes, or even become a scorching Sasquatch.
Ooh. Also in our show notes, you can find the link to our website, more information on our sources, our social media handles, and our merch store.
We'd love for you to keep creeping with us. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with your fellow creeps and or ghosts.
I beg of you. I was going to sing part-time lover as part-time dentist, but I don't want us to get more bad reviews.
More bad reviews?
Yeah.
Fuck them.
But just know that I was gonna.
You can't let them take this from you.
Yeah, part-time dentist.
Thank you.
Actually, that is absolutely not part-time lover. That was actually... Hold on.
What am I doing? Rosenbaum. I give up. Podcast done.
This is where you quit.
This is my... Yeah, goodbye. I'll send you an email of resignation.